This is the history of the Irish in Kansas City, brought to you by the Irish Roots Cafe, part of our series on the Irish in America from www.irishroots.com.
He stole one of his uncle's cows so that he could buy passage on a boat. So there were 21 children that were in this one home over there in Listowel. Well, I always remember the Irish-American picnics. Tom Pendergast was responsible for helping some of my relatives get jobs. Phelan, Murphy, Gallagher, Kinnealy.
I'm Michael Laughlin, your host. You can reach me with your comments by emailing mike@irishroots.com or by mailing to Box 7575, Kansas City, Missouri, 64116, the old-fashioned way. Phone in your comments to me at 816-256-3360. Please do call in and leave your message. We always look for comments, and you might be able to help us out with a little audio message of your own, letting people know what some of the history in Kansas City is, and for that matter in the Midwest as we expand our episodes. We've gathered together a group of scholars, authors, and everyday Irish to paint you the picture of the history of the Irish in Kansas City. Today we talk with Tom Walsh, Episode 7, Irish-American Picnics, Listowel County, Kerry, Chicago Connections, and Northeast Kansas City, when Ireland met Tom Walsh in Kansas City at the Irish Roots Cafe. Well, the cafe is where all of our free Irish podcasts and our blog and our other resources, you can search for your name for free to see what books it's in, and that's where you can find it on our webpage at irishroots.com. Keep that in mind, and I'm always looking for a good interview on the Irish in Missouri or in the United States or overseas for that matter, anywhere in the world. Take a look at the page if you can get the chance. Find a book, your family tree, or even become a member. It all goes to keep things rolling in the right direction. You can surely get there from here by going to our webpage. And remember to check the show notes for our blog on this episode while you're there. And remember the old Irish families in Kansas City. That's where we came from, folks. And this project just keeps rolling along. We've got interviews coming up with a couple of different O'Malleys. We're going to hear the story of Nellie Don and Jody Watson, the lone piper. Everybody knows Jody, sees him out in front of the parade when it comes about each year. Pete Meyer, the founder of the local Irish newspaper. And we've also got some interviews from the celebration recently held at Brown's Irish Market, the oldest business in Kansas City and the oldest Irish business in North America. Be sure to check out our sister podcast, the Irish Roots Cafe, on our homepage. And if you're enjoying these episodes, be sure to leave feedback on iTunes when you can. And you might even think about sponsoring some of these. I'll do it if you won't, but a little bit of help is always welcome. Now let's get ready to listen to today's interview at the cafe. You know, I paid no attention at all to where my grandparents lived when they were young. I only knew or cared about that house on Mercer in Guardian Angels Parish, the parish where I was baptized and where I remember the family gathering every Sunday. And we made that long trip from north of the river each week. I should have paid more attention. While I did trace the family back to Glenflesk, County Kerry, Ireland on my mom's side, I forgot about what history might have been waiting for me in the old northeast neighborhood here, where some of the early Irish settled. More than I realized when I began these podcasts. I think half the people I know have family roots there. Surprising, really. We talked with Tom Walsh this week, and he's here to tell us what it was like for him growing up over there in the Northeast, and I think you'll find it interesting. Welcome to the Irish Roots Cafe this afternoon. We've got another special guest. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Irish in Kansas City. Of course, if you're Irish and in Kansas City, it's not really history, it's part of your life. And I think that's real true for Tom Walsh. And I seem to remember my mom talking about the Relihans, and they were real close to the Donahue family way back when. And, of course, she'd mentioned that her parents came from some house somewhere over closer to the river, and I never really paid attention to it, but it turns out that was over in northeast Kansas City, which is recognized today as mainly what used to be an Italian-American neighborhood. But before that, it was an Irish-American neighborhood, and Tom might be able to help us with a little bit of that and tell us any of the memories he might have or where his Irish roots go back to. Tom, how you doing?
Doing fine, Mike. Just doing fine.
Do you know what's your connection to the Relihans?
Well, my mother was a Relihan. Her name was Honora, which in Irish is Nora.
Right.
And then as she got into her teenage years, then she dropped the Honora and it became Nora. But she was one of 9 Relihans. And my grandmother, who was Bridget, she came over from County Kerry, by a little community called Listowel.
Yeah.
And she came over when she was 16 to babysit for an uncle who had a hotel down on 15th Street. And then her husband-to-be, he came from also Kerry. Now, her name was Stack, and there's a Stack Mountain over there.
Oh, that's right, the Stack Mountains, yeah.
And so hers was Stack, and she had a number of Irish relatives who had come over and settled in Chicago.
Right.
And even, over the last 30, 40 years, we've constantly had people coming over from Ireland, and they stop off in Chicago and pop down to Kansas City once in a while.
Isn't that something? Now, when did you think the family first came over, and how'd they get to KC?
Well, she came over in, she came over when she was 16, and I'm trying to remember what that year would be, to be that babysitter for her uncle, Garrett Stack. And then Jerry came over when he was about 19, because, as you know, at that time, back in the 1880s, it was very poor over there, and the large Irish families just couldn't support. And, of course, with the English,
right,
trying to abscond with all the land and everything.
Right.
So they had to get out of there. In fact, there was one of her, Jeremiah's brothers. The word is that he stole one of his uncle's cows so that he could buy passage on a boat to go to Australia. But the rest of the family came over here, and then they'd been going back and forth. And there's the one of the things that enlarged our family was that my grandmother's first family, her mother died in childbirth after the 9th child, and then her dad remarried, and then he had 12 more children. So there were 21 children that were in this one home over there in Listowel. And so with all of that, and then as these people married and moved to the United States, they're the Boyles and the Stacks and the Rellihans.
And they all ended up in Kansas City.
Chicago and Kansas City.
Some of those, that's the big, and there's still Chicago, Kansas City, Ireland connections to this day.
Right.
Isn't that amazing? It's kept up.
There's an uncle, Patrick. I think he's 105 right now, and he's up in the Chicago area.
I'll be darned. Now, what about when you were growing up? Did you hear any stories back then? Of course, you would have actually known you were Irish before you were born, probably. There's no way around it. Did you hear any stories, or what was it like growing up?
Well, I always remember the Irish-American picnics. Sometimes they would have them out there at 99th and Holmes.
Right.
And we would meet all kinds of relatives. In fact, I think the Donahues went to some of those picnics.
Yeah.
In fact, my mother and dad bought their home from Patricia Donahue's dad.
Oh, that's right. That's my mom's dad. Yeah,
Right.
I'll be doggone. He had to keep that family alive somehow. And my mom said he even had a little thing that looked almost like a still in the basement where he made root beer. And she said that in front of a couple of her older brothers once, and they just smiled. So I took it from there that there might have been more than root beer going on in that basement.
Well, I heard about them making beer, never root beer, but it could have been.
Well, they protected the women folk in those days from any of that harsh reality of the world.
Yeah, well, I could remember as I was growing up. Of course, we lived across the street from my grandmother, Relihans, and she was a matriarchal type person. And people would come in from Chicago, always in the summer, but mostly they would come in around Christmas time. And then she would also go up to Chicago and help out with some babysitting. But she died when she was about 85. And there's an article. Maybe I can get that to you, Michael.
Sure.
That the priest announced that about how do you find a valiant woman. I'll get that to you.
That sounds real interesting.
He did a fantastic job. But it was a close-knit group. Of course, when you see that many relatives around, it's a big group, but it's very close.
That's the way I remember the Donahues. Of course, it's all gone now. They've all dispersed, or they're not here with us anymore. And it seems like these new generations is sort of sparse by comparison.
Yeah, well, you don't get the continuity nowadays that they used to have. I know I was remarking when I was going through my mother's papers. She passed away several months ago, and I was amazed that all of her brothers and sisters, they would write each other at least once a week.
Yeah, I remember reading some of those letters, and it's not your family, but my family. It's the same type of thing, and it's really amazing how their life was, their religion and their life was sort of much more integrated than it is today. It wasn't a separate thing, it seemed. It was much, they wrote very strongly and very emotionally, but unashamedly about things today that you don't even mention.
Right. And they just kept in communications, and it would be sometimes short postcards, or it would be little 1 or 2 page letters, all handwritten. Of course, today maybe they would use computers, but back in those days they didn't.
Yeah.
But my grandmother and her husband were married in Armadale, and he decided that he wanted to move to the Missouri side, and he moved over into the old Assumption Northeast area. Yeah. Which they moved into the house that eventually was right across the street from Mr. Donahue's property.
Right.
And they were my mother was very pleased. She moved when she was 11, and she said one of the best things in the world when they moved is they had indoor plumbing.
Oh, that would be a big change.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gee. Well, what do you remember about growing up? Were there any Irish events? Was there a parade? What do you remember?
I don't recall the parades. I knew that as I was quite small, back in the, it was even before my time, I could hear stories, but it was about my grandfather, Relihans, who was quite an Irish step dancer, and he would put on he would attend various Irish American functions to raise money for the Irish Sons of Freedom.
Okay, and now that was an active group in Kansas City.
Oh, yes.
The Irish Sons of Freedom.
I could recall them talking about he had danced out there at Carpenter Hall. I think it's just off of Linwood.
Yeah?
Linwood and Paseo. It used to be Carpenter Hall. We had so many relatives come around. I don't ever recall the parades, but I sure recall the picnics.
Yeah, parades might not even have been there then. No. They sort of cut off in the late 1800s there, as far as I can see. I haven't researched it, but it looks like they stopped for a long time.
Yeah. But see, I was born in 1928, and so I could recall mostly family. And I think that was the thing that I was not aware of. The strength of the family is that's what kept a lot of the people together. These family constellations really helped fill voids and kind of help problems that might be coming up.
Do you remember any names of any other Irish groups that were around back then?
Well, I remember the Hibernians, and then my grandmother belonged to a group but she belonged to some group. And then, of course, when they would have these Irish fundraisers to send money over to Ireland, she would make quilts and sell chances and things like that.
I think you might have had to sell a few chances there.
Yeah.
That was part of a young boy's duty, wasn't it?
That's right.
You better bring these tickets back and don't stop till they're all sold.
After school and on Saturdays, I would make the routes.
You go door to door and offer them a chance to win one of those famous quilts.
Yeah.
What about the Walsh connection?
My dad was, when you go back to the roots, he came, I think, basically from Wales and then came over to Ireland. And he was born in Pittsburgh, around the Pittsburgh area.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Yeah. And then his father moved the family from Pennsylvania to Armidale when he got a job with the railroad.
Okay, that's how you ended up in Armidale.
Yeah, that's how my dad ended up in Armidale, right?
Okay. Do you remember when you moved out of the Northeast area, didn't you?
Yeah.
But do you remember when you did that and where you moved to and why?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like everything else. I went into the Army and came back, and with the benefit of the Army, I was able to go to Rockhurst College and complete my degree. And then I went down to St. Louis University and got a degree in social work. Worked for Catholic Charities here in Kansas City, and then took a job in Jeff City with the state welfare department, and then just kept moving around. Went to Wisconsin, and then decided that family was very important, so I took a job with the federal government back here in Kansas City.
Yeah, I tell you, I'd be at the ocean if it wasn't for family. I'd be on the beach, but you got no family there, so what the heck? You better stick around. I wonder. Well, we talked about the organizations. Did you ever hear the name Pendergast when you were growing up?
Oh yeah, and of course, Tom Pendergast was responsible for helping some of my relatives get jobs.
Yeah, where'd they end up working?
Water department.
Yeah. Street
police department.
Yeah.
There were jobs that they used to say that nobody wanted, so the Irish took them.
Yeah.
And for whatever people want to complain about Pendergast, when I looked down there at the municipal auditorium and county courthouse and the city hall, he couldn't have been all that bad.
He left a big impact. He might have had a flaw like all of us do, but there's two sides to every coin.
Every coin.
Any other big names you remember from way back then, even if it was just for your family? Any sheriffs or a local politician, ward politician?
No. I knew politics was going on. The Irish always liked politics, but we basically we didn't get involved in that.
That's right. And, of course, the parish was very important, wasn't it? You sort of identified somebody by what parish they came from?
That's right.
And what were the big parish names that you remember?
Well, of course, I was basically born and raised in Assumption Parish. And as you earlier said, at one time that was kind of considered an Italian ghetto, but there were so many Irish there, I think you'd almost have to say it was both an Irish and Italian ghetto.
Yeah. That's where you had to start somewhere, and that was a good place, it seems.
And then there was, of course, Assumption Grade School, and then we went to Glennon High School, which was out there at 134 North Hardesty. It had formerly been a girls' academy, St. Agnes Academy.
What were some of the other, what other Irish names were in the neighborhood or in school that stick out for you?
Phelan.
Phelan, yeah.
Phelan, Murphy, Gallagher, Kinnealy. It's kind of hard. I hadn't thought about that.
Hey, you named a bunch of them. I asked that of my mom, and she came up with 2 or 3. She said, "You didn't give me time to rehearse."
There you go.
She says, "I got to go back and remember." I know she always said the Ennas lived close to them, and over in Guardian Angel, which of course is a whole separate parish, and I think there's still some Murphys over there kicking around. They're hanging in, old friends of the family. What else? Do you remember anything else that you'd like to leave us with? We got people will probably be listening to this for 100 years, and they'll want to know what was it like back then, and we can just barely catch the tail end of it now by describing those early days. And any other Irish activities you've been involved with or you remember?
No, it was just those looking forward to those times. I guess, back in those days, you didn't have to have something going on every minute of the day.
Yeah.
You kind of looked forward to maybe Sunday, or you looked forward to certain things. I was a bat boy for some of my uncles who played baseball and softball, and so I always looked forward to summertime on that. And, there was a period of time back there when we were always sweating blood in the summertime because of polio.
Oh, yeah?
A bunch of my friends and I used to always say, I wonder who might get polio this summer.
That was a was a terrible thing.
That was scary. We didn't really have to have all of the stuff that they've got today.
Yeah.
And I think that because of that, there wasn't all the confusion that some people have.
You didn't get as tied up with materialism. When there's not a lot of material around, you can't worry about it too much.
Right. You had to make games up yourself. Mm-hmm. We had sandlot baseball. I mean, that was my summer, if I could.
Mine too. I loved it. And now they have to plan their games. Yeah. And it's not, you just don't get together and go out and have fun with kids. You make a date or a play date and you do a specific thing. Much, much more organized and confining to me.
Yeah. But I'm just glad that the good Lord put me where he put me at the time he did.
Well, yeah, we were lucky. I was too. I was just on the tail end of that, I think. It was sure good. And what are you up to today? What do you do these days for entertainment?
A lot of volunteer work, and I belong to the Sarah International,
right,
which is a vocation organization, and Catholic men and women are committed to the priesthood and religious life vocations. In fact, I just came from a luncheon on that.
Well, I'm glad that luncheon had you in this area. That way you could stop by and do an interview. I was lucky to catch you.
God bless you, Michael.
I tell you, God bless you, too. And I tell you what, you sent some stuff to me that just illuminated the history of the Northeast area and some of the history of Kansas City. The parade that actually started in Kansas City, Kansas one year and came across the street, gave the streets the routes where the two cities united, and that might be a theme we want to try again, maybe just for fun. We'll get a handful of people to march from Kansas to into Missouri, have our own little parade.
What's the old saying, Michael? There's nothing new under the sun. Some people just discover it.
Yeah, that's right. It's the day was invented, the day you was born. I mean, there's just nothing happened before that. And I tell you, the older you get, the more important you know that is.
I think you're right.
Well, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you later.
All right, Michael.
Bye. Well, that's about it for the day. This is Mike O'Loughlin at the Irish Roots Cafe. Reach me anytime at irishroots.com, where you can find all of our books and podcasts, including our Irish Families Worldwide project. And be sure to check the show notes for the episode on our webpage. Donations and comments are welcome, and a big thank you to all of our members who make this all possible. That's all, folks. Until next time we meet right here, right where Ireland met Kansas City at the Irish Roots Cafe.